Okay, well, I thought maybe I would do a video just discussing kind of the 22RE, which as you can see here, I have my 22RE from my 1990 Toyota pickup. If you're familiar with the channel, you know I've done a lot of different things to it. As it sits now, it has an LC Engineering street port cylinder head with slightly larger valves. It has their carb small legal header, and I have a 2¼ inch free flow exhaust. Let's see what else. A port matched the intake manifold. It has a cam from, I believe it's originally ground by Web Cams. Nothing too exotic. Still running the factory Toyota ECU. So you can see a few upgrades, but I wanted to make a video kind of discussing the 22RE as a performance motor for anybody who is thinking, well, I want to get a little more power out of my, my pickup truck, or maybe my second gen 4Runner, or whatever, Toyota platform you may have the 22RE in. This applies also to the 22R, although I'll be speaking specifically mostly with regards to electronic fuel injection. So if you are thinking, well, I want to get a little more power, for my pickup truck or what have you, and I have experience with building, what would be considered high performance street motors, race motors kind of stuff. Turbocharging, have experience building turbocharged motors and different things. So while I don't make my living building, high performance engines, the way like, Papadakis Racing does or something, any of those guys, I do have a pretty firm grasp of what it takes to make horsepower, and I do have experience with different platforms. So I wanted to kind of give a little bit of an overview. So the first thing I'll say is that the 22RE is a 2.3, slightly over 2.3 liter motor. It's not the most advanced motor in the world. It does have a cross flow head. As you can see, the intake goes on this side and it goes out. It's a single overhead cam, so it has, and it has just, 2 valves per chamber. It's, more or less, it's not a performance geared motor. It doesn't have multiple valves, 16 valves or anything like that. It's kind of more of a truck utility motor, more like a tractor motor almost, a lot of people call it, but you can squeeze a little extra power out of it. Just in factory trim, the 22RE, I believe it puts out around, I think it's 113 horsepower. So, we're not dealing with a motor that rolled off the factory, in Japan, putting out tons of power. It more designed to be a very durable, simple, easy to service, reliable truck motor. In the 22RE, it has a single row timing chain, which is good for 100K miles, roughly 100,000 miles, maybe a little bit more if you push it. In my particular motor, it's kind of hard to see, but I've upgraded to a dual row timing chain, which is good for maybe more than a couple 100,000 miles. But we're not dealing with a super high performance platform. Now, if you're thinking, well, I'm not going to try to win GT3 classes on the racetrack, but I do want to have a little more, I want my truck to be a little more zippy, run a little bit better. What can I do, and what can I expect? Well, with my experience on the 22RE, you're starting at about 113 horsepower, and if you don't mind dumping, several $1,000s into your motor, you could maybe expect to add 20 horsepower. That's kind of the long and the short of it. So that's going to take you from around 113 to more like 125 or 130 horsepower. So, you know, if you really want to have a fast truck or have a lot of power, my advice would be to dump the 22RE platform and upgrade into something else, maybe like a 3RZ or a 2RZ FE motor, and then build from there. Because just swapping to a different engine from Toyota, you're still going to have high reliability, but you're going to, you know, jump from a starting point of slightly over 100 horsepower to more like 150 horsepower. Now, if you're dead set on keeping the 22RE, and there's nothing wrong with that, you have to also understand that you're going to be limited by the electronics from your vehicle that control the motor. So in just, you know, kind of general engine high performance terms, with a 2.3, slightly over 2.3 liter engine of this design, what is the most power you could realistically push or crank out of this motor? You know, it's probably going to be in the 160 to 180 range, and that's going to necessitate, you know, running stronger internals, probably some sort of high silicon or forged pistons. You're going to have to, you know, radically port the cylinder head and live with a cam that is going to open the valves quite a bit more. That's possibly going to necessitate, you know, a valve train, springs, and so forth that can withstand higher RPMs. Most horsepower is a function of high RPMs if you do the mathematics. So, you know, I think the stock 22RE has maybe 8 to 1 compression, so you're going to want to look to getting more like 9.5 to 10 compression. That brings with it a lot of other issues. You're going to have to obviously have a very free-flowing exhaust system. Same with the intake system. You're going to start to run into just you know, limitations on how much air can flow through here. You know, you're going to have to address things like your fuel injector cc capacity to pump enough fuel in. That means maybe the fuel rail doesn't have enough internal volume. So it starts to become kind of a Pandora's box of things. And you know, realistically with the 22RE, you probably are going to be lucky to get much above you know, 180 horsepower at the crank, unless you just go full-blown race motor that spins, you know, 8,000 RPMs all day long, and then you start to, you know, erode your reliability and drivability and things. And, you know, for some people that's okay. I've driven cars for years on the street with race engines that have full side draft 44 Mikunis, and, you know, it's fine with me, but a lot of people aren't really kind of, if they're using it to commute to work every day or sit in traffic in, you know, in a metropolitan area, that may not be as fun as you think after a while. The other thing is that once you get over about, and I'm just going to ballpark this, once you get over around 130 horsepower, you're going to exceed what the factory ECU is capable of understanding. I think my motor probably is pushing out around 135 horsepower maybe on a good day, and I'm right at the limits of what the factory ECU in the truck can kind of cope with and understand. So if you start going much above that, you're going to have to either run your own engine management system, which gets into a whole nother field of engine building. That's where you are going to be using things like a Haltech system, for example, might be appropriate for the 22RE. I personally like Link ECUs. You see those a lot more on drag cars and race cars and highly, you know, customized things. Obviously, in the world of Ferraris and Lamborghinis, Motec is used quite extensively. However, they're very expensive relative to like a Haltech system and things. So if you have designs on getting, like I say, more than around 135 horsepower out of your 22RE, you better be prepared to also learn engine management tuning and kind of spin your own ECU while you're at it. So that gives you kind of an idea of what you can do with the 22RE, kind of what are the realistic limitations. Now, I myself am a big fan of forced induction. As long as you're not overly concerned with the exhaust note of the car or having a normally aspirated engine, I personally like forced induction. I like turbocharging myself. That's a whole nother field. It takes a lot of research and real understanding. You can go back and read a lot of the books from World War II and things where airplane engines use forced induction and those kinds of things. There's some really good literature out there, and if you spend the time to educate yourself on how to build a custom turbocharged engine, you can really do pretty amazing things, particularly if you don't mind getting into intercooling or water injection or some hybrid of water and methanol injection. On a little motor like this, 2366 cc's, running 15 psi or maybe even 20 psi. It's hard to say how long the block and your pistons and things may live at that kind of, those kinds of elevated pressures. But, I would say you could probably get 250 horsepower out of the motor fairly comfortably in a street race turbo kind of thing. It's a little beyond the scope of this, what I'm trying to do here. I'm just trying to give you an idea of like what's possible with a few modifications on your 22RE. But in kind of a hot street turbo trim, I would say you could start creeping up on 275 horsepower without having to do too much exotic sort of stuff. Again, it's going to necessitate custom engine management, upgraded fuel injectors, and so forth. So I guess the point of the video is that if you're thinking about modifying your kind of stock 22RE, what can you expect? Well, the answer is probably around 125 to 130 horsepower. What's that going to feel like on the street? Well, it makes the truck much more fun to drive. It's much more, you're not going to be winning races. Anyone in a Prius, as I've said, can smoke your doors from the line, off the line. In a battle to merge into traffic, a housewife and even a recent Mercedes is going to outpace you merging onto the highway. But it will make the truck a lot more fun to drive around town and a lot more fun to drive on the highway. Now, I drive my truck up and down the coast, and I have no problem driving 85, 90 miles an hour for the whole trip, hours at a time. Doesn't overtax the motor, and that's a lot more power and a lot more speed than you generally see from a 1990 cruising around on 24-inch diameter stock wheels. I'm running, as you guys know if you've seen the channel, I'm running four-wheel disc brakes. I have forged racing wheels from Japan. I'm running, slightly larger wheel diameter, 28s, 28.5 outer diameter. I have a transmission in the truck from a Toyota, normally aspirated Toyota Supra. So I also have a 8-inch rear end. And I think I'm running 411, 410 gearing right now. I'm going to drop that down to 3.9. Now, as I mentioned, am going to switch to the 3RZFE in the process of selling my house and moving. But once I have a new shop, I already have the 3RZFE block, and I'll be turbocharging that. But that's a project down the road. Even with that motor, I anticipate probably, comfortably, reliably making only around 350 375 horsepower, maybe with water injection a little, the low 400s, 425. You also have to take into account what the chassis and frame can handle, what your drivetrain can handle. Things can spin out of control. Do you want sequential shifting, paddle shifting? Like, where do we draw the line? You know what I mean? But as far as the 22RE goes, if you're going to stick with that platform, around 130 horsepower with a cam. I will say that if you do get a cam, get an adjustable front sprocket. Retarding the cam can really make a big difference in how the 22RE breathes, or getting a custom grind can really help. I'm running, and I'll put the link to the stuff I'm running back to LC Engineering, and with the cylinder head cam, those kinds of things. I'm running my cam slightly retarded, I think 6 degrees, and that makes a huge difference. It allows the motor to rev more to 6,000 RPMs as opposed to kind of feeling limited at slightly over 5. So it allows the engine to breathe much better up high. So definitely having that ability to time the cam a little bit has really, in my opinion, brought the 22RE in this trim with the ported cylinder head and so forth kind of into its own, and allowed the engine to breathe up high a lot better. But like I say, the point of the video is just to kind of tell you, if you're interested in modifying your 22RE, and sticking with the stock electronics, you can expect to add about 20 horsepower, I think, is realistic. And that's going to require a cylinder head that breathes a little bit better, a cam, slightly larger valves, some sort of, more free-flowing exhaust header, as well as exhaust system. Beyond that, you're probably not going to be able to do anything crazy like 200 horsepower, 250 horsepower without turbocharging. And again, that is going to require some sort of third-party engine management, and that goes down a rabbit hole of wiring and engine harnesses that most people, either they don't want to spend the money to have somebody do it professionally, or they don't have the experience themselves to do it, or they don't have kind of the the broad understanding of automotive engineering to pull off a project like that. But if you just want to get a little more power out of your 22RE, free-flowing exhaust, that helps a lot. Anything you can do to open up the kind of breathing of the motor, whether it be a slightly bigger cam or slightly bigger valves, or a mild ported cylinder head. You don't want to go crazy, because you can end up with a motor that kind of will only produce power at 6,000 RPMs or above if you're not careful with porting and things like that. And this motor is really, in my opinion, it's probably not geared to spin much more than about 6,500 RPMs, short of completely changing the internals and pistons and everything like that. So that maybe gives you a little bit of a roadmap. Again, a little bit of power with a ported cylinder head and an exhaust system is really nice. It transforms the truck into kind of a slug to more of a peppy driving around the highways, and it just makes it a lot more fun. But that's kind of the limitations of the 22RE, and a lot of that is predicated on just what the factory ECU will handle. And in my experience, it's around the 130 horsepower level. Now, if you want to go beyond that and stick with this particular motor, you can look into other options with ECUs and things. But like I said, that's a big jumping off point. So anyways, hope you've enjoyed the video. Kind of give an overview of what's possible, what's realistic with the 22RE from a performance standpoint. And kind of, occasionally I hear people talking about how they're going to make over 200 horsepower with their 22RE. I scratch my head and say, I'm kind of curious to hear how you're going to do that. Are you planning on running 12.5 to 1 compression and race fuel, or like, where are we going with this? So just kind of with the 22RE, you can get a little power. You're not going to get a ton of power. Again, if you want to make a ton of power, the best thing you can do is switch to a different platform. And I like the 3RZ FE a lot. That motor in stock trim is about 150 something horsepower, and I think with even modest modifications in normally aspirated trim, I think you could probably push out close to 200 horsepower on that motor, and that is a really, really great motor from Toyota. So I think that's probably a good thing to look into. Again, in turbocharged trim, which is what I'm building, you probably get up close to 400 horsepower, and at that point you're starting to get into the land of, you know, can the drivetrain even handle this much power? Can I get this much power down to the ground? You know, do I want to have this much power in a 1990s pickup truck? So, you know, that's kind of things to consider. So anyways, as always, if you have any questions on anything I've covered in the video, please feel free to use the comment section below. Hope you've enjoyed the video, and thanks a lot for watching.